Hello, this is Lorraine Watry, and this is the second video in this series. The first part of this this painting was done as a demonstration for Daniel Smith Artist Materials, and I did mention this in the last video where I finished up the Hummingbird. And if you would like to see the very beginning of this painting, you can go to the Daniel Smith Artist Materials website, and I believe they have their live videos maybe linked there somewhere, or I do know it's linked on their Facebook site, or you can go to my Facebook site under Lorraine Watry, and you'll see the link for that video on that site. So then, if you haven't watched the first video on YouTube where I finished up the Hummingbird, that would be something to do, and I will link that in the show more section of this video. So now I'm going to go to the flowers themselves, and hopefully I can get it done in one video. I may speed up sections of it because basically once I get the flowers going, it will be the same kind of thing as I'm working through all of them. I may stop here and there to discuss something, but there may be parts of this video that I do speed up. So I am going to pull out my colors, and because I used the green gold on the Hummingbird, and I do see a little bit of that similar color in the stem, I'm going to pull out some green gold. And then I will be using Quin red for the flowers themselves. It's almost exactly this red that's on here, and then parts of this will be different colors, but I may use maybe Quin magenta or Quin lilac on this stem with green gold. So I'm going to pull Quin lilac out to test with the green gold. And that green gold on the stem up in here is very muted, so I don't want it to look like it does on my palette. I'm going to see if I have a piece of paper that I was testing colors on, and just going to take a little bit of the Quin lilac and add some of the green gold to it and see if I like that mix. Possibly not bad. The other option is to go back to the Quin Burnt Scarlet that I had been using on the Hummingbird before. Maybe I want a little bit of the Quin lilac in that, which that would be okay as well. And I think the way I'm going to start this stem is wet on wet, and I will have some of the green gold in parts of the stem where it's a little more on the green side, and then actually down here where it's more in shadow, the bottom of the stem is a bluer green, so part of it will have a little bit of this color down there, but a lot of this bottom part is a different color of green. And this is a salvia plant, and hummingbirds really like salvias. It's that long tube that they can get their beak down into. So I'm going to pull out more green gold. Have a lot of that available, and my Quin lilac, in case I want to put some of that on in the mix. And then later I will have to come back and add a second layer, and then depending on how that is, I may then be ready to do the shadows, but I may have to break it up into a couple, or 2 or 3 layers. So this will just be a first pass of color. So I will use the water down the stem, and I will be trying to avoid the flowers that are overlapping, and then there's little places on the stem where the flowers connect with the stem, and I can paint those later, so I will be avoiding those. And then this is a good stopping point, so I can do the second half in a minute. And I'm just using the green gold with a little bit of the Quin Burnt Scarlet to start. And I dried the back of my brush because I am placing this on paper that is still semi-wet, and that way it'll move, but it maybe won't move as far as it might if I didn't dry my brush. It takes a little bit of the moisture out of the brush. Take a little more off. Okay, and I don't know if I need to clean my brush necessarily, because I think I want a little bit of the green in the mix to mute this rusty color. So I am drying my brush again. And then see if I can just paint around some of the green. And then I am overlapping some of the green with a little bit of this color as well. On this edge, there's a little bit. Okay, and this bottom section will have dried more because I was taking my time up there, so I need to move with a little speed now. Make sure that I can get some color on before it's too dry, and I will probably have to come back with a little water because this is a little drier than I want and it's leaving hard edges. And I do have some of the green up above peeking through, but some of it's kind of hidden now because the rusty color went over it farther than maybe I wanted it to. I guess it's not bad. But I'm going to just see if I can push a little more green into those areas. And my brush is pretty dry right now, so if it were really wet, I would probably end up with a bloom happening. But because it's pretty dry, it's pretty good. And then I can come back later and I'll add another layer and adjust that some more, because this is more muted, a little more burgundy in there. All right, and then I'm going to add a touch of water right here and water down below. Same thing, I will use the green gold first with a touch of the Quin Burnt Scarlet in it. And I didn't dry my brush, partly because I didn't go get any water on it when I went to pick up my color. Also, this is a lighter value than the Quin Burnt Scarlet and Quin Lilac mix. I also didn't take the green off of my brush just now. I let it, oh, I forgot this little triangle there. I'll have to come back for that. I think I will dry my brush a touch. Make sure that the color doesn't move too much. right here on the edge. And my brush is actually going over the edge just a little bit, but because that background color is so dark, it's not hurting to have the stem color be over the background. I don't see any overlap lines or anything, so in this situation I don't need to be extra careful there. And that little piece right here is where the stem connects is lighter, so I'll just leave that. There's a little bit I missed right there. Okay. So then I'll go down to the bottom and get that piece in. And this bottom area will definitely need to go darker later. It's quite a bit darker since it's in shadow, but I can just start with base colors. And actually on the video, I don't know later when I look at it, sometimes it's just my screen that makes the video seem darker than it is, but I don't know that it's really showing how the different colors and things that are in here. I should have wet beforehand. I think, yeah, oh, I do have a little bit of color on my brush, but it's not bad. So I think I'll go ahead and use this, even though it's got some color. And then I should, oops, I should pull out the color I'm going to use for the green of the stem. And I'm going to pull out my ultramarine blue and New Gamboge. And I may also get out a little bit of sap green. But I don't know that I'm going to want it. Okay, so that's lost a little bit of the shine up here, so I'll re-wet. Okay. So generally when I'm doing a wet on wet painting or wet on wet area, it's a good idea to have your color out first. And I had started to wet it and then realized I hadn't done that, so. Okay, some of the more muted green in a couple places on here. And then some of the burgundy. And then I will go pick up, nope, I'd pick up some sap green. I kind of changed my mind. Drying my brush. Maybe a little bit of the New Gamboge in the mix now. And I didn't clean my brush in between. And then there's a little of that up in here, and a touch right in here as well. Okay, so I think I'll leave that for that first coat, and then I can come back and add more to it later. Okay, So this stem is pretty much same kind of thing, even though in my photo it is very lit. I am going to do the same colors as that are on this stem over here. This was actually me manufacturing the photo a little bit because there was a branch here that was not the same thing as the salvia, and I just laid it out on this photo a little differently, and then I even added another actual bloom over here and not just the casing for the back side of the bloom. And so it looks a little different on the photo, so I will be ignoring that and I'll be doing what this stem is showing me down here. But I'm going to go up to the top and get started on putting some color on the flowers as that stem is drying. And like I said, I will be using Quin Red, and I may add some color to it at some point. I do have some Quin Pink sitting here on my palette. So I'm going to start with a little bit of Quin Pink on my brush, and then I'll go into the Quin Red. And so this top flower, kind of on this upper left side, feels slight bit pinker to me, very minimally, but a little bit. And then I'll just go pick up the Quin Red, and I didn't clean my brush, so I'm letting them merge into each other. And then this will eventually have to have probably another layer or two. Let's see, where does that go? Okay. There's a point right there. And then oops. Okay, and then I'm going to come around, and since this is a base coat, I'll go ahead and just put this base coat on, and then later my second coat, I may warm it up in some places, or I may just darken it with the same Quin Red to give it more depth, because right now that's very flat looking. Okay, go down to the next one. Same thing, I'll start with the Quin Pink, and this is on dry paper for all of these. So while I am painting these on, I need to make sure that I'm moving and keeping the paint damp. So I'm working over here, this is starting to dry, so I could take my paint and just kind of dab right there and let the paint release onto the paper, and that gives me time to move down to this area, and then I'll go pick up the Quin Red, and now that piece right here hasn't dried before I can come back up. Trying to see where this goes. Okay, and there's a really highlighted area right here. So I think I'm going to break this into a couple pieces. And this is a little drier right here, so I'm just going to run my brush across it with just a touch of water on it, so that hopefully I don't end up with a hard edge right there. So I'm going to take a little water and just place some water in some of those highlighted areas. And I don't have to place the water everywhere on this bloom, but just those highlighted areas where I want to have a softer edge, lighter edge. Okay, just start it with the Quin Pink again. And I don't know how much the Quin Pink will actually show up in the end, but for now it works. And since it is so dry here right now, we'll see if my water that I placed on there is actually still damp. It's already drying. So I'm going to come back with some more water here in just a second, and I will re-wet. I'm going to find a place right there I can pause. So there is a little water on the paper still, but not enough. I'm going to switch brushes because I don't want to put too much water on the paper. So this is my number 8, or my 12. Nope, it's my 8. And I am drying, I wet the brush and then I dried it on my towel before I touched the paper. And that way I'm not putting too much water on the paper that could possibly cause a bloom. I just want it to be damp enough that I can soften the edges and leave a highlight. So basically I'm lifting back a little bit of color and softening edges. Okay, and then I'll leave that part, come back to that. Down to the one by the bird. I'm going to get out more Quin Red. Okay, alright, so I'll try again. I'll wet the paper again. And this one has some shadows across it, but it does have some highlights in parts of it as well. And a little bit of the Quin Pink to start. And then picking up the Quin Red. And again, I think I'm going to just stop right there. I may have to soften an edge or two when I go to do the part on the left that I haven't, of the flower that I haven't done on a few of these, just so that it connects better. Okay, so that did dry. You can see I have hard edges everywhere. So just use the smaller brush and go back and soften the edge. And again, this is wet, and then I dry it on my towel a little bit. And I think there's a little bit of a highlight right in here too. So I'm going to lift this back just a touch. And I could let this dry completely and then come back and lift, but because it's still damp, as long as I don't overdo it with my water, not damp, it's not quite dry is I guess what I should say. It's lost the shine, so it's not fully dry, but it doesn't have a shiny surface anymore. So it's sometimes easier to lift while it's just a little damp. Some colors, and most of the Quin colors are somewhat staining, so it can be a little easier to lift while it's slightly damp. Okay, and then I'm going to go down to the one that I made up. down here. I'll put some water on the paper right there. Touch of my pink. And I'll just leave that on my brush and then pick up my bigger brush to do the Quin red. Values, there's some softer edges here and there, and I do think I want to warm up the color just a little bit. So I think I might add, I'm going to clean off this Quin lilac here. I think I might add, try some Quin coral with the Quin red, because Quin coral is a warmer red and might be just enough, but I'll go ahead and try my mix on a piece of paper to make sure. First, Quin red, and some of the Quin coral. Okay, so I think I'll use that, and then if I decide it needs even more at some point, I could adjust from there, but for now I think that's good. And I'm going to use my smaller brush to add some water to part of this bloom. And I know I want to put the darker value down in here, so I'll just use the water on the upper edge, and that way I will have an edge that is soft for transition, where it's darker and then it is soft edged, where the darker value will connect with the lighter area. It does have a tiny bit of a highlighted edge, so I think I'll leave that. And then there's a hard-edged angle to this shadow right there, and then it does sort of just go down in here, and it kind of fades as it goes down in this area. So I'll put this color on, and then I'll come back and soften some edges. And then this back side is, I can come into that in a minute when I've got this softer. So now use a little water, and sometimes I will put the water on the paper first, and then sometimes it's just easier to put the color down and then come back and soften the edge if I need to. Partly because I then know exactly where the color will be, and then I can just adjust the edge. And then sometimes you just forget and you don't put the water down first. Okay, so back side of this bloom, I'm going to wet up into here, and I'm staying back from my darker value right there. And then I'll just continue to use this brush since it's a small area. And maybe a touch right there. And I also think I'm going to put a little bit back in here because I don't want the back edge to be too flat looking. So a little more color up in there. Okay, so this area right here, I may end up coming back with one more layer right up in there, but I'll wait till it dries and just kind of look at it to see if it needs more. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and put color on this little stamen. It's basically the same color as the bloom. So earlier when I did this bloom, I did not finish this section of it. There's a highlighted area kind of right in here, and then there's a lower part of the bloom that is basically same color as the bloom itself. And so the highlighted area I'm going to just leave white for right now, and I'll paint the front section. And I do have the mix with the Quin Coral in it, and so I'll just go ahead and use that, and then I can add another layer to this section to put some Quin Coral in there in a little bit. Leave that. So I need to do the same thing down here on this bloom, and it is a touch lighter right here. So I just added a little water to my brush. So whenever I'm working on whatever I'm working on, I'm thinking about the values, not just the color. And I didn't mention this, but you may see me moving my board around a little bit. It is tipped on my riser, so I have it off the surface of my table about 2 inches. So that helps me keep the paint and water moving down the page rather than possibly causing a back run. Now, if you weren't real comfortable making up the bloom from maybe others that you're seeing on the page or in other photos, so this bloom was either one that I just made up out of my head, or it may have been one I was looking at on another photograph of mine. And if you're not comfortable with making it up out of your head, then I would have either the same bloom where you adjust it slightly from one that's already on the paper, or another photo where you can see same plant, same color, all of that, but it's got a different bloom that you can work with. Okay, so I'm going to do the stamen for this one. It may not be the stamen, but it's a little curly Q that's on the end of the flowers, so I'll go ahead and get that on. Okay, I'll go back to this one, and that's pretty dry already. If you were wondering if you need to dry it some more, then just use a dryer and then you'll know it's okay. Alright, so I'm going to use the Quin Pink in this area if I actually get some on my brush. There we go. And then there's going to be darker color around it, and right up in here as well. I do see some, and then I will come back later and put some darker color in. Okay. Put the stamen on. And I'll go back up to the top. Okay. So I'm going to work on this one a little more. It's getting there. It's pretty close. So because I don't want to mute the color on these flowers, they're vibrant, I just want to darken the value. I don't necessarily want to go from mixing my red with a purple or a blue. I want to try to stay in the red family and see if I can darken it with something that's in this area so that I'm keeping it vibrant and not changing it too much. So I have the Quin Red, that's my base color, and I also have, so I've tried the Quin Coral, and that did warm it up a little bit, but now I want to go in with something that's even a little darker, and so I think I'm going to try, I can't talk, not Quin Carmine, Carmine. And Carmine is, well, this is Carmine, and it's still on the cooler side of red. It's darker than the Quin Red. So I think I'll try mixing Carmine and the Quin Red. And just use that corner over there. So this is Carmine and Quin Red. And I do have more Carmine on my brush now. And so I want to put that kind of in this area and then a couple other places on here to darken parts of that up. And because I want it to be a soft transition, I don't want a hard edge, I'm going to take some water, and don't need too much water on my brush, just want to wet the upper section and maybe down about halfway or so. And then take this smaller brush with that darker value. And this will really start to make the bloom feel more dimensional because I'm adding that darker value, and that's going to make that lighter value really start to pop and stand out. So we need that darker value. And right here, this is darker. Maybe a touch right there. And then I'll put a little bit in there. And some right down in here. And then I do need to come in with my water on a couple of these edges. Back here it had started to dry just a little, so I got a few edges that are a little rough or hard-edged there. This was a shadow that is hard-edged, and then right here I want to pull that color out just a little right in here, soften that, and then same thing back here. Going to soften those edges. Alright, so now that one is looking more dimensional. There is a tip of a bloom that's hiding behind these guys. You can't see it all, but I can see this red piece right here. And so I'm going to use what I had been using, the coral and the Quin Red, just to kind of get that started. And it should be more pointed than my the white area that I left here, so I will have to come back later and fill in that white area with a little bit of my background color, or I can just soften the edge and blend it out. So I'll get rid of that white later. Right, so these guys are dry-ish. Yeah, they're dry. So right here, this piece, this little piece right here, and then this area down in here, those are part of a bloom that has started to fade or die off. And so I am going to use some water and just kind of get that going. And so I'm just placing water in some of the areas where I'm seeing some lighter sections. Okay. And then I am going to just put in some color, and I'll leave some openings here and there. And then a part of this later will have to have more values. It'll get darker in places. So right now this is probably mostly just quin red. There's actually a stamen over here that I missed making that curve. It is kind of yellow over here that's changed color from what these guys look like. But I'm just going to keep it like that and not worry about separating it the same way it is on the image. I'm going to put that stamen in while I'm thinking about it on this one. And then the other thing I want to do is I am using a flat brush with a little water, and I'm going to see if I can lift this highlight on this edge and make it a little stronger. Alright, so I have first coats on most everything. Well, the flowers themselves I don't have on there. Background area, or not background area, the part of the flower that they grow from, the pod, I guess. So I'm going to start a couple of those, and then I will probably speed up the next section where I continue adding layers. But I'll get going on some of this. And I'm going to pull out some of my quin sienna and more of the quin red. And then I think I will use some of the quin coral in this as well. And I'm going to start up at the top area right up in here. I tend to just paint top down anyway, but this one is on the edge, and it gives me a chance to put in some of these colors and then just try the colors together, make sure everything is what I want before I get too far down into the lower section. So I did go pick up some of the quin sienna, that oranger brown. I showed it on the first half of this video series because I used it in parts of the Hummingbird. So again, I'm just kind of getting an idea of my colors and sort of getting a roadmap of the values, and then I can come back and darken them later if I want to, or adjust, make edges sharper or blur edges if need be. And I can't really tell what this area is doing on the photo, so I'm just kind of making this little section up, but that is a piece that kind of sticks out from the branch that is where the flower blooms from, and because it's on the edge, I don't want it to be too detailed. It's more just a shape, and I actually came down too far. That's better. If this painting ends up being something that I frame and matte, then I will come over 1/4 of an inch on all the edges, and so those little shapes right there will go away anyway. They'll be under the matte. And then down here, there's a couple things going on. I'm going to put a little bit of water on there, even though later the highlighted areas will have harder edges. So this is sort of just getting some of that warmer tone in this area, and then I will come in. Actually, I may go pick up some of the Quin Coral now. And then I lost a little bit of this highlight, so I'm going to just use the water and lift back. So I want a little bit of tone on here. I don't necessarily want it to be white. And that's why I added some water to the paper before I started. And later, as I mentioned, I can come in and add a little more value and also harden or make some of these edges sharper. And then on this side, this dried already, but I'm going to go ahead and use some of the Quin. Actually, I think I'm going to put a little bit of the Quin Sienna in it, so it's a touch different from the flower behind it. And I'll go back up to that top piece right here, and I'm going to add a little darker value right in here. And it does have a lighter value, but I don't think I want it to be this light right near the edge, because those lighter shapes can pull your attention, and I don't want the viewer's attention to go off the page right there. So I'm going to fill that in, make it a little pinker, and then down in here, it's still a little damp, so I'll go ahead and use my blow dryer. And if you're interested in my supplies and what I use, I do have a page on my website. If you go to, I believe it's on my blog page, that there is a page that shows a link to the different supplies I use, and they're linked to my Amazon affiliate program. And that affiliate program, I do receive some funds back from Amazon. It doesn't affect your price. It's your price stays the same, but by referring customers to those products, I get a little bit of a kickback from it. So just need to make you aware of that. And that does help support my channel, so for me it is helpful. All right, and I am going to add, I think, a little bit of ultramarine blue to Quin Burnt Scarlet because I need a darker value right here. All right, so this is drier now, and I'm going to go back down into this area, and I'll start with, actually I think I'll put a little bit of the ultramarine blue with the carmine to make it go slightly purple and mute it just a little bit. And then as it comes down, it feels like it's a little warmer here. Oh, and so I'm picking up the Quin Coral and a touch of the Quin Sienna to warm this little piece up right there. And then I do have some lines of shadow There's a darker red down in this lower section, and then it does warm up again as it comes to the left. And I need to add some water because that's too dark for parts of this. So I'm adding water just to lighten it as it goes to the left. So some of my color mixes are just kind of playing with the color and seeing kind of a variety of colors on this, and it's not getting too stuck on, well, I used that exact color over here, so now I have to try to match it exactly, because in nature, and actually I can see it on the image right in here, there is a variety of colors. It's warmer here, it's a little pinker in here, and then it goes darker red. It also is maybe a touch more muted right in there. So it's not specifically one color or even a color mix. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And there is this white area back there that is part of this bloom that is leaning over, and the bloom itself needs some more layers to it. So I'll go ahead and work on that for a few seconds, and then I'm going to do a time lapse for getting some of these first layers on. And just kind of some random marks right in here, so I'm looking back and forth at the photo and then just touching the paper here and there, and then I'm going to soften some of these edges so that they're not all hard-edged. And down, putting a touch of ultramarine blue, because right in here this is darker. And actually I'm going to come back up into a few of these areas with that same mix. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes I will darken a red with a color in its family, so another red, and then depending on what I'm seeing or how far along I am, if I feel like it needs to go darker, that red or whatever color I'm using, then I might use a neighboring color, so, or neighboring family, to make that color darker or possibly neutralize it a little bit, or both actually. Alright, so I am going to continue getting first layers on these and get some of the red flowers a little farther along, and then I will slow it down again and I will be back. I have first layers pretty much on everything now, and the only place that I haven't adjusted yet is right here. So one of the things that I want to do is just take my round brush and I'll place some water in there and then just kind of touch against the edges and move a little bit of the color into that white shape, so it's not as hard-edged and pure white. And then now I need to go in and start adding values and adjusting edges and that kind of thing. So I don't have shadows in yet. I'm not worried about those just yet. I want to get on more layers, and so I'm going to start with this bloom right here that I was just adjusting that center for, and I'm going to get out my Quin Red and the Carmine. And I might as well go ahead and get some of the Quin Coral out, just to have that available if I want it. And then I'm going to start with some water at the top of this flower, just like I did that top one up there. so I can end up with a darker value and not have hard edges. And then as I'm adjusting this again, the second pass, I know that I will still be going back into it and adjusting parts of it again, but this starts to give a more dimensional feel to the flower. And these guys moved a little bit too far right here, so I'm using clear water and just coming back and pulling some of that back out a little. And then I do want, there's a little slightly warmer and darker area right up in here. That was risky touching right there because that's starting to dry and my color on my brush was a little wetter. So we'll see. Hopefully it won't cause an issue. There is a shadow that comes across that, but again, I'm not doing the shadows just yet. I'm looking for other things that I need to adjust. This shadow that is on this one, that bloom that's dying, does need to go darker, but for now I'll leave it. Let's see, I'll go ahead and, well, that is a shadow, but I'm going to go ahead and put this in because I feel like the lighter value that I have here is dark enough already. Just going to smooth these harder edge shapes. They're still drying, but they're dry enough that I can just use a little water on them and dry them a touch more. Now on these flowers, even though I've been going around some of the lighter areas, later if I feel like I lost a little bit of a lighter area, I can always go back and lift and pull some of that off, partly also because these not all of them, but some of them are softer edged. Yeah, that one's dry. Well, I may be adjusting this one still, so I'll wait. I was going to show that, but I'll just wait and come back to that. So this needs darker value in here. My marks, and because the beak is one of the centers of interest, so the head of the bird and then the beak moving toward the flower are important areas because it's part of the story. It tells you what the bird's doing, kind of moves your eye through the scene as well because it points you that direction. Having some detailed, harder edged shapes near it are helpful to pull attention there. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting some of that in. And then I also need to lift a little bit of some highlights back in this area so that some of those darker values will pop a little more. And also those lighter values help pull attention. Okay, so I'll let that dry, and then I can come back in a little while and lift. So some of this layer will have harder edges, and parts of it I will soften, but some of it will have harder edges. Okay, so I'm going to dry this one, and then I can do a little more on that, maybe finish that one up. Okay, so on that one, as I mentioned, I do want to lift some of the highlight back, and so I'll try with my flat brush that's not as stiff. See if it'll take some of that color off. It's starting to, but I think I'll go ahead and use the other lifting brush. All right, and I think I'll go back up and work on this one a little more. So I should dry that where I lifted, just because even a little bit of water right in there could cause me to not have the harder edges that I want now that I'm farther along. So as I get farther along in a painting, that's when I start looking for the pieces that need to be refined. Sometimes it's more color, sometimes it's softening an edge. It could be putting a glaze or a layer on. It's, yeah, just kind of coming back and checking all the parts of it. Quin sienna, I can't talk, more of the quin sienna on a few parts here so it warms it up and gives it a little more depth, a little more, maybe not depth, but a little more life. It gives it more body, I guess. And then this area right here needs a touch more color and soften that edge. All right, so I'm going to zoom back in and I'll work in here for a little while, and then I'll probably speed it up again so I can add more layers to all the pieces. Same thing I've been doing here, where I just start adding darks and values, and sometimes lifting, sometimes adding water to soften an edge or keep edges hard-edged if need be. And as I don't know if you can, yeah, I think you can see it. This part of this flower is not as dark as it will need to go, so you can squint at your image, or you can squint at your painting and see if the values seem to match. Sometimes what I do is I'll just look back and forth really quick, and I notice things that way. You can also look at your image in the mirror backward, and a lot of the time that will tell you if your values are working, if they're kind of matching what you're working on, or if they're separating on your painting, because at some point it becomes more about, is it working for my painting? And then you make adjustments if need be. All right, so I'll zoom in and I'll be right back. So this one doesn't need a lot more, but it does have a few darker lines in a couple places, and then it has a darker value down in here. I think I do want to lift in a couple places, and one of those is right here where I want this highlight to be stronger. Now, Quinn colors are staining, so some of the color will remain unless you really start scrubbing hard, or depending on your paper, if it can handle it, sometimes you can use a Mr. Clean magic eraser to lift with, and that will take off even more color. But you need to make sure you always check your paper before you use that. And I'm okay if there's a little color left on there. I don't need it to be pure white. I just wanted it to have a little more light on there. Now the bottom lower piece on this lower right of that same area is not quite dark enough, so I'll come back and darken that in a little while, but I'll keep going until I do that. Here on this one I have a hard-edged white shape, and so I'm going to just come in and use the scrubber to pull that edge and make it not as hard-edged. Same thing right here. My big paintings, the ones that are very detailed, and depending on how much, how many things are in the painting, they can take, I've had paintings that taken 40 to 70 hours, depending on the painting and, as I said, how detailed they are. So when I'm doing something that's realistic, this is not as detailed painting, partly because the background was soft edges everywhere, and I was just playing with color and pattern sort of for those background shapes and foliage. But some paintings have very detailed backgrounds. Sometimes they're both soft and hard-edged. Can just really depend on the painting. You can see a lot of my paintings on my website, so if you want to go look at LorraineWatryStudio.com, and you'll see a variety of subjects as well. I like to paint a lot of different subjects, and so I don't normally paint very fast because I am looking for all of the subtle nuances of edges, and trying to be careful with my values and colors, and sometimes just little touches in a realistic painting can make a difference on how realistic it looks. And there are paintings, as I said, that I've done that have taken many hours, and I know there are other people that do realistic paintings that could take even longer depending on what they're painting. So, but I really enjoy realistic scenes and painting realistically. I know that watercolor is often thought of as loose and light. I like lots of color and darker and darker, I mean not darker and darker, but darker, oh my gosh, a full range of values. And so for me, that's the way that I'm going to use watercolor, and you may in your own artwork not want to paint that way, but a lot of these techniques are used whether you're painting in a looser style or a more realistic. Okay, so I am going to speed this. Oh, actually, I'm going to do this, as I said, this flower right here, and then I will come back and I'll speed it up and start working on other parts of the painting and just do it as a time lapse. Okay, so for this bloom right here, I need to, just like I did up here, I need to darken this again. It has one more value at least. It may have more, but I need to go a little darker. So I'm pulling out the carmine, and I'll probably go ahead and put a little bit of the Quin red with it, and then I'll use some of my ultramarine blue with that mix. And I'm going to add some water to the paper, and I'm coming down over that second value. So I'm hitting the top edge and then coming past, so maybe about halfway down this time, and I will wet the paper about halfway across this area as well. And then pick up my Quin red and some carmine and a little bit of the ultramarine blue. I don't want a lot of blue in the mix because I still want it to look red. And that's going to give me that look by keeping it mostly red. My mix, that is. And go pick up a little more carmine. I know this back edge needs to go darker. And then I'm just going to soften this edge right here with a little water right along the front edge of that and right along this upper section. Okay, and I will go ahead and put the shadow in on that right now just to show you that. Not that it's a huge, not a huge shadow right there, but it's kind of fun to go ahead and get it in. Carmine, touch of the Quin red and ultramarine blue. And this shadow is right about here. And it kind of, oops, I'm going the opposite way from the way it's coming down the petal. Right there. And then there's a touch of a darker value right here. Maybe a little more on that. Okay. All right, so I am going to go ahead and speed up this next section, and basically the same kind of thing. I'll just keep working through each part of it. And there are some shadows that I still need to put in some of these areas as well. This could possibly even go a little darker there, but I may wait until I get more in on the stem to know if I want to adjust some of those areas, and I'll just kind of keep working through it. One of the things to know is that as you're working through your painting, sometimes adding a layer, say right here, might make a difference on how this looks. And so it might be something where once I've got more color or value on an area, that you have to look at the area next to it and decide, do I need to lighten that area or darken it? You know, does it need some kind of adjusting? So just know that even though you may think you're done with a certain area, that sometimes you do need to go back and make an adjustment somewhere. All right, I will zoom out and keep working. So I did want to mention that I decided to bring in some of the lunar purple, or lunar violet actually is what it is. And that's what I was pulling out of this little container here and putting on my palette. I don't keep it on my palette because I don't use it that often, but since I use the lunar violet in the background, I wanted to use some of it in the flowers, and that way it keeps the colors working around the painting. And so in some of the areas that are a little more muted and kind of purpley, I decided to use the lunar violet there. So I used some down in here just recently and right in there. And I'm liking how it's working. It's muting some of the more vibrant reds and oranges, and helps connect it, as I mentioned, to what's the color in the background. I do think I want to put some right up in here, but I want a little bit of Quin Coral and Quin Sienna with it. So it's kind of a mix, well, it is a mix, not kind of a mix, of those colors, just to bring in a little more of that color that's kind of glowing on that one. I think I need a little more sienna. Maybe I'll just go straight sienna right up in here. All right, so I'm getting close to the bottom now, and I do still have a little more color to put on this one, and so I'll use the Quin Red and my Carmine to darken parts of it. And then I think I will come back in with a little bit of the lunar violet, and I'm putting it on my palette first. I tend to do that most of the time. I don't usually just pull it right out of the wells, even if it's already on my palette, because I want to make sure that I can kind of tell how much pigment and water I'm using. So I don't usually pull color straight out of the well and use it. a little more of the Quin Sienna on this one. I have a edge on this that is very white. Even though I like the highlight, I don't want it to be so hard edged because I'm not doing that kind of edge in other parts, other than I need to go up here and fix this because this should have a little tan or yellow on it. So I'm just softening those edges with some water. And in. Okay, so I still probably have to put a little more dark down here, and maybe actually a touch of pink. Well, pink. And I'm going to come in and see if I can get that darker while it's still slightly damp, so it'll have some softer edges. And then because these tips on this left side are so close in value to the background, I'm going to see if I can lift touch of color off of them to make them stand out just a little more. And then I may have to come back and put some darker value around them if that bugs me, but it may be something that I don't even notice once I step back from the painting. And that is something that you should be doing every now and then when you're painting. Step back, take a break, do something else, and then come look at it with fresh eyes. You will often see things that you've missed that need to be added or adjusted. I'm going to lift. Okay, so the bottom part of the stem is a lot darker. However, I do need to make sure that I don't have it the same value as my background. It's okay if it's really close or if parts of it are the same value, but I want to make sure that it does separate from the background. So let's see, I need sap green and ultramarine to start. Make my dark blue, and then I'm going to just go swipe my brush into the Quin Coral, and that will give me a muted green blue. And then this side, just dried my brush, or cleaned my brush a little and dried it. Took off a little of that color that I had on there, and I'm going to put a touch of coral. So I'll give that a few seconds to dry, and then I may actually lift a little bit of the background right there. So while that's drying, I'm going to go over to these guys, because I said I was going to add some shadow to them so that they're not standing out as much, and so they look like they're below the pieces that are above them. And I'm just kind of making up where I want the shadow. And then because I don't need this bottom edge of the stem to stand out from the background too much, or don't want it to stand out too much, want it to sort of fade into the background a little bit, I'm putting a little more color down in this area so that the values are closer down there. All right, so, oh, one last thing. I want to try, and my blade is not very sharp right now, so I'm okay that it's not. I'm going to use it to flick some of the paint, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see this better. So I flicked by just scratching sideways over that edge, and I'm taking off a little bit of paint, and it's skipping, and it'll give me that edge that's caught the light from that side right there. And I will bring it down just a touch. Oops, gotta hit the right spot, don't hit the background with it. And there are little tiny hairs on the side of the stem, so it's catching the light, and I think I'll try it on this other side as well. Let me rotate my board. Yeah. So instead of lifting or coming back with the opaque pigment, like I mentioned, this is another option. And also, like I mentioned, you want to make sure that you're not wanting to paint in those areas again, because it does rough up the paper and it will look wrong or bad if you try to paint over something that you've scratched. But I do like how this is looking because it's giving me the look of those little tiny hairs that are on the stem, as I mentioned, and that's hard to do with a brush. So and my blade is actually a little dull. Most of the time when I use this for cutting my tape for masking, I want it really sharp, but because I've used it recently, it's a little dull, and that might actually benefit doing this method of scratching. So I'm going to zoom back out, and I will look at this painting for a little while before I definitely say it's done, but I think it is probably either done or 99.9% done. So I hope you found that interesting, and you got some ideas for working on your own painting flowers, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for following along. Bye. Have a good day.